Hello everyone and welcome to Module 5 briefing. This is going to be a bit condensed because this module has two chapters for reading. And a lot of it we have already covered to a certain degree in previous modules, especially with respect to implementation. Chapters 5 and 6 go into a little more detail on implementation strategies and software and vendor selection. I wanted to point out a couple of things that you should be aware of and focus on. For example, in Chapter 5, one implementation strategy that's becoming more popular is something known as virtualization. This is where you use a virtual machine in a very large server to serve a number of different applications. For example, in previous times, prior to virtualization, you might have a different server or a different computer or a different box, whatever you want to call it, each dedicated to run a particular application. But in a virtualization scenario, you've got one big box where you have virtualization software that mimics multiple different servers, so that it has a lot of different advantages. You don't have to have a separate box or a separate server to run each application. Plus, you may get away with having fewer seats, for example, because many of these applications are licensed by seats. So you can have a certain number of seats and calculate the probability of how many people using it, and then just have one license. And then if someone wants to employ this application, statistically you only have a certain amount of people accessing that application at one time, and you could reside it on a virtual server. So a virtual machine, it's a technique to run multiple and isolated virtual servers on a single physical device. If you think about it, what does a physical device has? It has memory, it has a processor, it has operating system software. So that's what would typically exist if you had one server servicing every application. So using software techniques with a lot of additional memory and processing power, you can make the application think it's running on its own dedicated server. Okay, there's two known ways to implement this: hardware virtualization or para-virtualization. Now there's vendors that do this. For example, Microsoft Virtual Server and Virtual PC. There's also Oracle Virtual Machine. Now you could even try playing with a virtual machine by downloading a free copy of VMware, for example. And if you, like for example, I also teach in the project management program, and we often have Mac users, and Mac users cannot run Microsoft Project. So one way to do this is download VMware and then upload into VMware or run on top of VMware the Windows operating system. So if you go into VMware, make Windows think it's running on its own hardware or its own PC, and then you run MS Project within that virtual machine, Oracle's VMware. SAP doesn't say what software customers can use to virtualize applications. They give tools to allow you to do this if you wanted to use a virtualization approach. Okay, so you can do provisioning and deployment, more straightforward. You could lower cost, for example, because you don't have to have separate servers for every application. Lower disaster recovery cost, enhance business continuity and availability. But the problem is, even though you don't have to have separate boxes for each application, you do have to have resources that applications draw upon, which is processing power and memory. And if you try to run too many of these on one particular virtual server, then you may overload your machine. And there's also security problems. But in any case, I wanted to point out that this is a popular approach and it's something to think about, and I want you to be aware of it. And if you really are that interested in it, you can try it out yourself on your own PC or laptop. All right, so when you do engage in ERP implementation, you have to think about vendors. There are vendors that you're going to have to deal with because chances are you're not going to write your own ERP system. Now, some may prefer to run an open source operating system, but you still have to buy an application, and if you're going to customize it, that's a lot of work. But typically, you're going to have strategic partners for your ERP system. And here's the process that you typically use. You research vendors because you're going to have to acquire your ERP system through vendors. You're going to ask those vendors for demonstrations, and you need to evaluate them. And here's the rub. Many vendors come in and show you their wares, but you can't really know what you're getting until you exercise it. You look at your needs, your requirements assessment. You may put out a detailed statement of your needs in terms of a request for a bid or a request for proposal. For example, an RFP is what it's referred to. But you may even need more information before you can issue an RFP. So some companies will issue an RFI, a request for information. Okay, you send the request out to vendors. You have vendors submit their bid. You evaluate it both from the technical side, functional, reviewing demonstrations. Very important to contact who these vendors have been working with, see if they're satisfied customers. Try to understand what the total cost of ownership is, because it's going to be a lot more than just the price. There's going to be negotiation, and typically, in addition to the vendor itself, you're going to be working with consultants who help you implement this. The consultants may come from the vendor itself, or you may have a third-party consultant to help you do it. All right, once you send out that bid, you're going to have to bring it down to a short list. There's some that may not have the right architecture or may not have the fit right off the bat, so you may scrub that list and get down to your short list. All right, and then after you get down to your short list, then you start getting department managers involved, subject matters involved, even end users, to thoroughly vet that short list to get it down to what do you think is going to meet your needs. All right, look at other businesses using the vendor. Look at the financial position. You don't want to implement a system and then a couple of years later the company go bankrupt and get acquired by somebody else. That could be nothing but trouble. How good what's their track record of supporting their clients? What about how current their software is and the direction of their software, its architecture? A lot of things to consider. All right, and here's the typical short list: SAP, Oracle, Lawson, SSA Global. And in all cases, you're matching what are your requirements to the features that the vendors offer to see who has the closest match. You may look at the data and functional flow of departmental or business processes. So this assumes when you're purchasing software, ERP software from a vendor, you know something about your own processes. Not all businesses really know that, so you have to be aware of that. Okay, and you also get to the request for proposal, request for bid stage. You have to be sure you identify what type of functionality you want, what type of hardware and software infrastructure you're going to use, what requirements you may have for training, and any specific contract issues. Contract management is going to be essential. All right, and then you do the analysis of your vendors, you eliminate them. Vendors that aren't a fit, you get down to the short list, and at that point you sign a contract with the supplier of the ERP software. Contract terms are really touchy. You have to make sure that you clarify what it is that the vendor is going to deliver and when, what is your acceptance criteria. What you want to avoid is a situation where you have consultants coming in and they have no vested interest to finish in any given time. Consultants, when they're in helping you, you're on the clock. You know, the clock is running, and the money really adds up. So you need to do what you can to keep the contract terms tight and don't allow consultants to run up the tab on you. Okay, so so much of ERP successful implementation is not just technology and evaluation of the systems. It is having the correct contractual terms and managing that contract carefully and making sure there's a really clear communication of what you want and when you want it and scoping it very carefully. So that's the highlights for this week. Be aware of virtualization as an ERP solution. architectural solution. It's becoming more popular today. Also, there's a simple process for ERP system implementation, as we saw in the last module. But always remember, in this process, you're typically not developing something on your own. You are involving third parties, and it may be multiple third parties: the ERP provider, third-party add-on software, consultants. So you have to really be good at understanding your processes, knowing how to do a contract vendor management scenario in terms of going through the vendor selection process, narrowing down to your short list, making sure you're very clear in your contract what the terms are, protecting yourself from getting billed to death by consultants implementing your system, having very tight, clear terms with clear acceptance criteria. All of these are related to management skills as opposed to technical skills. So this part of the ERP implementation can make or break your company. So handle with care and tread lightly. So that's just the highlights of Module 5, and we'll see you in the discussion.